Well, I'd like to welcome you back to my fourth video in the chemical quantities unit, and you may recall that in video 3 I talked about how to determine the molar mass of a compound and from your periodic table, which is not too tough of a concept. Our next step is to use the left side of mole land right here, which is basically our mole triangle. So we're going to use our mole triangle today to figure out how many moles are in a number of grams of a substance, and perhaps how many grams are in a certain number of moles of a substance. And I'm going to go back to some of the substances that I found in my shop. And you may recall I talked about copper. These are sort of used in plumbing. Okay, so I pre-weighed some copper here, and I determined that we have 6.35 grams of copper in this container. And the question is, how many moles do we have here? So in order to answer this question, you're going to need your periodic table. And I know I keep saying that like a broken record, but get it out. Have your table out and your calculator. Okay, so make sure that you have your calculator handy. To make this simple for you, I have picked some very, very round numbers that will make sense. But nonetheless, when you go to do some of the problems in the book, you'll have to use your calculator. So let's determine this. Here's our question. How many moles are present in 6.35 grams of pure copper? That's our question. Well, let's write down what we know. So we know two things, really. We know that the molar mass of copper is 63.5 grams per mole. This is what we went through in video 3. So that should be easy for you to figure out. The other thing we know is mass. And of course, I chose this number very carefully. 6.35 grams of copper. So we've got those two things, and now the last thing that we need to find would be the number of moles. And so we're going to use the mole triangle over here in order to determine our moles. Simply enough. So if you look at our triangle, you can see that moles is equal to grams divided by molar mass. Makes a lot of sense, right? And we plug in our numbers. So there we go, 6.35 grams divided by 63.5 grams for every mole of copper. Remember to cancel out your units. So grams go bye-bye. And lo and behold, we have 0.100 moles. We'll talk about significant digits another time, but for those of you that have been through physics especially, maybe this makes sense. This number has 3 significant digits, and so does this. Bottom line, we have 0.1 moles. Let's try one more before we stop for this video, and we're going to go back to our water. And you may remember that I said we had 360 milliliters of water. I don't know if you can see that or not. And the question is, how many moles have we got here? We can figure this out very easily. So, how many moles in 360 grams of water? And the reason why I just changed my mils to grams is because we know that 1 gram of water is equal to a mil and vice versa. The density of water is 1. So that's pretty easy. same as before. We know what we have here. We're given the molar mass of water is 18 grams per mole. That's because water is H2O, and each H is worth 1, and that's 2, and the O is worth 16. That gives us 18. We also know the mass, which is 360. Now, I chose these numbers in a very simple way again because I realize that I'm just going off the cuff here and I don't have a built-in mathematical brain like some people. So if we look at moles, we look at our triangle, that's equal to grams divided by molar mass. And of course, in this case, we have 360 grams divided by 18 grams per mole. And you can see that our answer would be about 20 moles of water. So at the end of the day, this 360 milliliters in this 500 ml cylinder contains 20 moles of water. That's quite a few actually when you think about it. All right, so this takes care of calculating our moles from grams. Our next step is to calculate grams from moles. So let's just do one of those. So I happen to have my drywall here. This is my calcium sulfate, and we can work the other way around. So in this case, I'm telling you that we have 0.2 moles of calcium sulfate. And the question is, how many grams would we have in this container? So let's take a look. How many grams are present in 0.20 moles of calcium sulfate, which is basically drywall or plaster of Paris. Very similar to what we just did. We have to use the mole triangle, but in this case, we're trying to find moles from grams instead of grams from moles. And that's a bit different, but it's still the same. Let's write down what we know. Like always, okay, we know that the moles is 0.2. And we also know the molar mass of calcium sulfate is equal to 40 plus 32, which is 72, and 64 is 136 grams per mole. I trust you can use your table to do all that, and I challenge you not to use your calculator. Use your brain. It's in your head, and it works well. Okay? So we've got these two things. Lastly, we can find our moles because we know that grams is equal to moles times molar mass. And we're almost done at this point. This will be equal to 0.2 moles times 136 grams per mole. And again, I picked these numbers in a nice, easy way. 0.1 times 136 will be 13.6. So 0.2 times 136 would be 27.2 grams. And that's all there is to using the mole triangle. You now know how to calculate grams from moles and moles from grams. The next step is for us to look at going from mass land through mole land to particles and vice versa. Until then, we'll carry on learning in isolation, having some fun along the way. Look forward to video 5 coming your way soon.